And welcome to Contractors Conversation. We have Ms. LaShawna Patton-Jones joining us today, and we're discussing recruiting and bidding and government contracting. We want to welcome you to our platform, taking time out with us.
Welcome. I'm glad to be here today.
I think this is an important topic we want to discuss because there's a lot of errors going on, and we want to just kind of dispel some myths and kind of drop some tips and clues and kind of help our audience along. So just, everybody heard your bio before we started, but just kind of introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, I'm LaShawna Patton Jones. I am an HR professional. I am a talent manager for a government contractor in the Washington, D.C. area. I hail from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I have a master's degree in human resources, organizational strategy. And I've been in the D.C. area for around about 17 years in government contracting, approximately around about 12 to 13 years with different types and levels of government contractors.
Okay, so let's just start here. So you talked about the different types of contracting.
Mhm.
Does that affect the recruiting or the
Uh,
recruiting methods that you need to use when recruiting for contracts?
well, certainly it does affect how you recruit or approach the creating a pipeline. And it also depends on where you are within the contract, whether you're in pre-award or post-award, or whether it's a rebid contract. So there are eagle contracts, there are contracts that are blanket agreements. You may be on GSA schedule where you're just supplying people through an automated system. You bid daily, and then you win the award and you fill the position. Or there may be an RFP or RFQ that you have to use resumes to prove that you already have those people slided before the award is actually given or the government actually awards the contract. So there are different levels to it. Each level and each recruitment path, you have to have personnel already in alignment with that need, as well as a depth of knowledge when it comes to whether that particular contract will need people that are fully cleared or they give you time to clear the folks.
Okay, now when you say fully cleared, kind of explain that to our audience. What do you mean by that?
Fully cleared meaning you have already went through the adjudication process of being put through a background investigation, both criminal and credit consumer background investigation to be suitable to work for the government. Suitability will depend on what the findings are in the investigation, and the investigation can take from 3 weeks to 6 months to a year for it to for you to receive your government clearance. So government clearances could be a public trust, which is the lowest clearance, and it could go all the way to a full scope polygraph, top secret, or to a Yankee White. A Yankee White allows you access to the White House and the upper echelons of the government. So it clearly is a very stringent process, but being fully cleared means that you have completed the investigative background and have been given the paperwork stating that you have a top secret with a poly, top secret with a CI poly, and so forth.
Okay, and I've gone through the clearance process myself, and excuse me, and it sounds intimidating, and it can be intimidating, but it's just answer honestly, truthfully. give as complete of an answer. This is not a time to be fancy with your answering. People out here giving some interesting advice when it comes to answering questions. Don't be fancy with the government. This is not the time to practice creative writing
Right.
with your resume or your background, because quite frankly, it's just not worth it. If you have a degree, you have it. If you don't have the degree, you don't have it. And it will
Well,
always show up.
they're gonna find out. Some clearances they go back 5 to 7 years. Some clearances they go back 20 years. Whatever debt you owe, you cannot owe more than $25,000 of outstanding debt. So if you have a lot of debt, I would suggest one of the major things I would say that holds up a clearance is the verification of the legitimacy of debt.
Now, I
And
never knew how much the debt was, but I knew debt played a factor.
yes, $25,000 or more comes into question. They're going to
Oh,
wonder, yeah, and that can keep you from getting the job, even if you pass the criminal history part. Just because you have criminal history, that does not also mean you will not get cleared. You can have criminal history. That you're going to be asked to explain that criminal history and how recent the history is, but it doesn't totally bar you from becoming cleared with the federal government. What will hurt you more so is omission and lies on the investigative report. That would keep you from that would most definitely keep you from um, being deemed suitable to work in the federal space.
okay. So what I'm hearing is excessive debt, omission will hurt you more than actually having a criminal background.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's the worst. These are worse than having the criminal background.
Right. And back taxes, not paying your taxes on the government money, even as a contractor, even as a federal employee, that can also you can have a clearance and have your clearance taken back
Yes.
if you owe the IRS and refuse to pay the IRS. So even if you already have your clearance, one of the major things that people lose their job for in the federal government is that they won't pay their fair share of income taxes. So omission is the biggest, one of the larger problems when you're filling out the forms to provide the background information. Some omission is via error, and they know that some omission is by error, but some omission is purpose. If you know that you spent 7 years in prison, just say you spent 7 years in prison.
It's kind of hard to
You
forget you was
can't.
locked up for 7 years.
All right. You can't say, "Oh, that wasn't me. That was my twin, Jerry." No, that wasn't me. so, you can't omit those things if you know that. I mean, the best thing, honesty, is the best policy. Just
Yeah.
be transparent. The after you go through the actual filling out of the forms, you will be set up with the time that an investigator will call you, and you will do a 2 hour to 3 or 4 hour investigative reporting, and you will have to dispel almost your whole life. The last investigation that I went through, I broke down in tears because it made me remember a time in my life that wasn't that desirable. It brought back some bad memories for me, and
Wow.
I had to explain some things that happened with my ex-husband that I didn't necessarily want to come up in the conversation, but I didn't have a choice because some of these investigations require for them to go to your next door neighbor that you grew up with, and they'll knock on their door, or the neighborhood that you live in today. They'll come to your neighborhood where you live today, and they'll knock on your door and say, well, what kind of person is she? What kind
Oh,
they'll go
wow.
to one of your former employers and say, well, what kind of person is she? If you put it on that form, whatever your employment or past address history, creditors, or whatever you put on that form is open field for them to investigate.
And I want everybody to keep in mind the small print on the forms that talk about that jail time.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get ready to put on there and you call up your cousin Lou, to ask your cousin Lou to pretend to be a past employer because you don't want to use that past employer, I want you to keep in mind, cousin Lou, that the penalty for perjury, there's that small print that they're not telling you that's on the form. So
Mm-hmm.
just be honest.
Yeah,
But
honesty is the best policy because they're going to find out. So you might as
always,
well, because they're going to run, even if they don't need the 15 or even if they don't need the 10 years, they're going to pull 20 years.
they
Okay.
always go back further than they need because they always want more information just in case somebody's dead or the company doesn't exist anymore. So that they can check off all their boxes because they have a compliance audit that they have to go through. They have to make sure that they verify that they did all that they can do to ensure that you are who you are supposed to be, that you are trustworthy depending upon what position you're filling. And we're going to go to that point next. And so they have to verify that you are worthy to access the information that you're supposed to be accessing.
Right.
And as a business, we want to ensure we're hiring people that are supposed to be filling the roles that they're supposed to be filling.
Correct.
Because we're acting as contractors, we're acting as a public trust. And we're saying this person is trustworthy to fulfill these positions within the government.
Correct.
So everybody is a filter, a screen, excuse me, in this process.
Mm-hmm.
So when, excuse me, so when this process is going through and people are like, this is like hyper intensive or hyper intrusive, it's that public trust. As a taxpayer, we have to look at it two ways. I'm trying to frame this conversation a little bit. As a taxpayer, do you want an untrustworthy person with access to sensitive information?
Correct. But not only that, do you want a person that can be easily bought by foreign entities
Yes.
to have codes, to have information that is secure, that secures us as a nation. A lot of the people that I hire currently, it's pertinent to national security. So there are certain things that I even can't disclose, locations where I can't disclose, things that I cannot disclose about my current contract because it is a threat to national security to expose those things. And so therefore there has to be a level of integrity that is in place, and the person has to be very cognitive of how they handle security measures. So they can't like send date of birth and social security via email or text message, because then you'll do it to someone that you're working with. If you would do your own, then you'll do someone else's. So therefore, we can't allow people that are not sensitive to very dangerous information.
How you do some things is typically how you do all things.
Correct, correct.
And people don't want to acknowledge that as a truth. But if you do a self audit, you'll see, you will see
Mm-hmm.
if you're sloppy with your finances, then how are you going to be responsible with a multi-million dollar government budget?
Well, it just like I said, it's a people set patterns.
Yes.
And once we see a pattern, we know that that person is not suitable for this type of work. They not saying that they cannot work, but they
Yes.
can't work on this sensitive work.
Yes.
Most of the contracts I work on currently are Department of Defense contracts, and they are pertinent to national security. So I have to make sure that we're hiring people that can handle being in a certain um, in certain situations and are not pressured
Yes.
by foreign entities to and give in and sell our secrets to foreign entities.
It's let me get back on track with this conversation. So when companies are in the recruiting process, you
Mm-hmm.
know what? Let me backtrack a little bit because we have the before we get to the recruiting or in tangent with the recruiting is the bidding.
Correct.
So we have this RFP, RFI, whatever, and the position is coming out. Now, every company is in business to make a profit. And that profit has to sustain that company in whatever economic environment comes forth. What a lot of companies fail to do is bid appropriate. They fail to bid appropriately. And now you then have to create a salary that is appropriate for that position. And now here's the recruiter recruiting for that position. Now, what is your piece of advice for a company in a contracting position, contractor trying to recruit for a contract?
One big piece of advice is a lot of contractors are very small and they want to go after larger contracts so that they can get, some money to build up their business so they don't have to take out a loan. But this is what I will say. Number one, hire an expert recruiter. If you don't have a recruitment or HR staff that can handle your HR, because there's a lot of pieces that's going to have to come into play when you first ramp up on a contract or bid for a contract. One of the things is onboarding of the new staff. If you're going to offer benefits or wraparound services to your employees, you are going to need people that can do that, and that's not going to be the job of the program manager or the CEO of the company or the CFO of the company. That needs to be a sole separate division of someone dealing with the first parts of introducing the company to the candidate. So one of the major things that I see is that a lot of small government contractors, small meaning in the number, not the company, small meaning that they're going after $5-10 million contracts, $15 million contracts. And that, to some people, that may be a lot of money, but in terms of government contracting, that if you're not doing 150 to $100 million, you're considered a small
Yes.
government contractor. So anything 50 million or less, most of these companies don't have HR departments. They don't have a designated recruitment or recruitment strategy as to how they will approach the market. The second thing is that you must know that realm that you're going into. If you do not have any past performance in that realm, I would stay away from it. Or I would partner with a business partner that does have that strength to be your to go in on the contract and y'all piggyback on the contract together. You may want to enter that contract as a woman-owned business,
Mm-hmm.
and come in with that designation, and then you may partner with a veteran-owned business, and y'all go after the contract together as one entity. Or you'll partner with someone that is hub zone, which is very needed in the government, but never very underutilized. So there are different designations in the government that allows for you to partner, and two companies go in to get the contract together, and one is bearing the infirmities of the other, the weakness.
Yes.
I have to use biblical terms. One is bearing the infirmities of each
Yeah,
other.
I like that.
So, um, so once that balances out, it's just like any other relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be a balance. One company may be very sound and organizationally structured to be able to have, they have the funding to fund it, because you're going to need some upfront money. They have everything in place, but they don't have the people. The other company may have the people or the pipeline or the
Mm-hmm.
past experience. If they call for past performance that is relative when you're bidding on the contract. And lastly, I would say, um, the third thing that I would say is to have resources, to have a company. If your bank account is not deep enough to
Mm-hmm.
cover the first 5 to 6 months of payroll
Mm-hmm.
for that company, I would suggest that you get a relationship with a payroll funding company. And then as the government pays you, you can pay the payroll funding company back. It's no different than running a staffing firm in the commercial world. It's just that you're doing it via the government. And as you know, sometimes the government can be slow in paying you. So that shouldn't trickle down to your employees. If you hire these employees and they're looking to be paid a certain amount every week or every 2 weeks, then you're going to need that funding in place, um, even before the bidding process. That's all you're going to have to show financial suitability during the bidding process. They're not going to give you a $10 million contract and you
Whew.
can support the $10 million contract. And then two, let's go back to the integrity that we spoke of before. Don't lie and say you have this structure in place or the resources in place,
And
and
you
then
know.
you don't, and you get the contract, and then you can't fulfill the contract because you running around spending 90% of your time trying to get people that you don't even have the resources to pay. So, and I see that a lot in
Yeah.
government contracting. I see a lot of people get so excited to win that first $1 million or 10 or 12 or $15 million
Mm-hmm.
contract, and they don't understand that around about 70% of that contract is going to be going to payroll and resources.
Yes. They get caught up in the big numbers and they
Hmm.
don't understand that 90% of that $1 million is payroll.
Hmm.
That's not that $1 million contract. I wonder, can we just say it honestly? $1 million business is not a big business.
No, no.
When I sat down, I do my budget every year and I do my projections every year. And I actually walked through projections with a potential client and she got mad at me and I didn't care. You know, it is what it is. And she was like, I'm going to have $1 million business next year. I was like, that's nice. What are your revenue goals? What are your profit? $1 million. Okay, so what are your revenues? $1 million. You can't have $1 million revenue and $1 million profit. What are your goals?
They don't even know
You
their
can
they
click.
don't know their numbers. And that's another thing. We can speak to that as well. Know your numbers. You have to know
Ah,
your numbers. You
that
have to know your
conversation
numbers.
was painful. And when I did the math and we did her, okay, now, where's your expenses? And when she saw that number coming down, she was mad. Don't get mad at me. This is 2 plus 2 is 4.
Right. And
And then when you
and it's
start to
hard.
subtracting and we
Mhm.
started seeing negative, I said your revenue and your
But it's hard for
expenses.
people that see you working and that they see you making money and they thinking you bringing all that money home and they don't understand that the first 5 years you probably won't see but 10 to 15 to 20% because you're building the
Yes.
business. You're
Which is why the
investing.
IRS allows
Right,
you a negative. You know, everybody kept talking about Uber has negative. Yeah, the IRS allows you a negative the first 5 years or 7 years, depending upon what type of business you have, because
right,
everybody understands you're going to run in the hole at first.
right, right,
Everybody understands it except Joe Blow
right,
in the street because they're not in business.
right,
They just see they made X amount of money. Yeah, but after they made it, they had to spend out all of this.
right, right.
And then, but
The
their profit was,
it's safe to say that $1 million that that young lady made, it's safe to say she probably only saw 350,000 of it.
not even.
Right,
And then we got to talking about, okay, now you have duplicate expenses. We
right,
only want to talk about efficiencies. That's a whole nother conversation.
right.
Because there's efficiencies within the recruiting process.
Yes, it is.
Once
It,
we establish a recruiting process, then we can make it efficient and
mhm.
streamline. And we can get into all of that, but we
Yeah.
have to establish it.
Hmm.
And that comes through hiring professionals and seeking wise counsel, such as our guest we have today. You don't do that on your own.
Yes.
You know,
And all
I
of this comes with a price. It all comes with a price. You hire consultants, you
yeah,
hire all kinds of software folks to improve the efficiency and operations of the business. A lot of networking and a lot of marketing
yes,
dollars goes into putting into a business, and it's a lot. It's a lot when you're first getting started. It's like you're feeling your way in a very structured type of environment,
yes.
but you have to know where the support is to get you from point A to point B.
You have to, because if you don't make the upfront investment, if
Mhm.
you don't do it right in the beginning, it falls apart.
Yes, it does.
And it's harder to rebuild than it is to just do it right in the beginning.
That is correct.
Because you sometimes you can save the burning ship, and then sometimes you just have to save yourself, watch it burn, and start over.
Right. And I would say that a lot of businesses don't do a business analysis to see, or we would call it a SWOT analysis,
Yes.
to see where their weaknesses and holes are in the business. I just did one and I found out what my holes were in the business. And a lot of people don't really see why change management is important, why um,
Whew.
running an agile environment is a Kanban environment is very important to the business streamlining of the business operations. Why there's communication systems in place. So, like I said before, it's not a recruitment or talent management in any space. It's not cookie cutter anymore.
Yes.
It's
And
no one size fits all.
then I know in the military space they love to do these debriefs.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
after everything, I don't care what kind of project, whether you win the project, you should do a debrief of the win
Right,
because there's
right,
always something you could have done better.
right, right,
After you lose, you should do a debrief
right, right.
because there's something that could have been said better.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, is it really that serious? Yes, it's that serious.
Wow.
Because you can't build, I always say this, people have $1 million dreams, but they have penny processes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or no process at all.
Oh, and there we have it. And then you wonder where your $1 million is. Your
Mm-hmm.
$1 million is in the process.
Right.
And then you want $1 million dream, but you want to pay $50 to your team to support that $1 million dream.
Right.
And I'm not saying you overpay. No, because quite frankly, salary, you know, there's a hot topic and a hot buzz topic, and I'm gonna bring you back to discuss that. But salary has a cap. It has a natural cap.
Right.
There's salary grades, and especially in the government, they have caps
Yes.
and pay grades and all that stuff. But if a position has a band
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to require this person to have all these bells and whistles, then the pay should match.
Right. That's correct.
So, and the recruiting should match the pay.
Correct. But that doesn't necessarily align all of the time, because sometimes what happens is that very new companies or companies that are struggling go in and underbid the contract, which
Mm.
undermines the whole entire process. They're so focused on winning the contract that they don't understand that they're compromising their business because they're not going to be able to fulfill those positions at the
Mm.
rate that they stated. And of they run the risk of compliance issues on
Oh,
the back
yes.
end once they have completed the contract. Then here comes the meeting in the board, the meeting in the blue was the blue in the basement or meeting in the boardroom.
No, you said it right the first time in the basement because they
They
hide.
start having, they start having the meetings in the basement, meaning you on your way through the garage out the door.
You said it right. Because that boardroom meeting is like, why can't you stop this position? Because $1 million contracts have key personnel.
Mm-hmm.
And key personnel are people you told the government were going to be on that contract from beginning to the end, that the
Mm-hmm.
government only awarded you the contract based upon, and you can't switch out without
Right,
the government's approval.
right.
Now, I don't want to use that LIE word, but you told the government that person was a guarantee. But when
Mm-hmm.
you told that person what the salary was, and that person said no,
Then you had to go back and replace that person.
and the government said no,
Mm-hmm.
because the person you could get at that pay isn't who the government wants,
Mm-hmm.
but the person the government wants, you can't get at that pay. Now that contract is in jeopardy.
Right,
Now the rest of the team you don't hire, but that whole contract is at jeopardy because your bidding and your recruiting was in conflict because you tried to lowball.
right. And that happens a lot. More often than I would like to really admit to. But it's a learning lesson, and then some people never learn their lesson. They go through the contracts and they just do it over and over. Now, another trick that I found out about is that people have become expert proposal writers. And so they have workarounds that they put into contracts, that the contract may have listed job descriptions as
Mhm.
A, B, and C, and they can flip it where they can use a synonym, a similar position,
Yes.
and do a whole different price list under
Yes.
that position. And
Yes.
that's how they're winning the contracts. The contract, every position that was on the contract, they underbid. But then they add an additional list. You
Hmm.
may wanted this, but just in case you need that, which is similar. So you may have a secretary one or
Hmm.
sec two or sec three, and you underbid on those positions to be able to win the contract. And
Hmm.
then once you when they slip in the back, when the addendums or
Yes.
appendices, they'll slip a second price list in, and it'll say admin one,
Hmm.
admin two, or admin three. And those positions is where they are like socking it to them, you
Oh
know,
yeah, I've seen
25,
those.
35% markup. And then when they call for people, they was like, oh, no, no, no. You don't want a sec one. You don't want a secretary to us. I have a great administrative assistant, uh, two over here. So they're capitalizing on the dollars that way. But then when the compliance people come, then it's a different story.
Yeah, because I've been on those audits. When I was in corporate, and I'll share those stories separately, but we bought one of the company I worked for bought
Mhm.
um, a couple of 8A companies that was in the midst of an audit. And I'm going to tell you the only reason one 8A company got bought is because they lied on their books.
Wow.
They lied. And when we went through the audit, everybody got ghosted.
Because it's coming, whether you want to or not.
It came out in the audit. They lied
God is
on a lot of
coming.
stuff. And
Uh-huh.
when I tell you one guy, he sent his um, resignation in an email at 5 o'clock. He was home when he sent that email. I was sitting in there in the auditor and I with the auditor, and
Mhm.
they just flat out told blatant lies. And I'm sitting in there with the auditor, like, okay, I'm trying to tap dance. And I was sitting there with the choice of I'm either lie because my creative skills was at its end. And I went into my manager and I closed the door. She was in there with the VP.
Okay.
This is how I was at my
Mhm.
wits end because she was in there with the VP. I walked in her office and closed the door and said, I'm either going to have to lie or just tell this auditor, y'all going to take all these costs because I can't do it anymore.
Right, right, right,
Because I just laid it there. And that's how I ain't care. She was in there with the VP. Because
right.
she was eyeballing me and I told her, stop eyeballing me. I know who you in here with. But you
Mhm.
threw me to the lions, and I'm throwing you in there with me. Because you threw me out here to make me look bad. I'm gonna make you look bad too.
I mean, and then sometimes the government get real hands on. The government may send their own chief or director, the chief of staff of the actual agency, does a
Yes.
lot of it trickles down. They say, look, this is not who we asked for, or this is
Yes.
not what we wanted, or this, you said you could do this in the contract and you would have this person or that person,
It
and
get,
you're not fulfilling your contractual agreement.
and when the government does that, it get
It's
ugly. Them talks get ugly.
it gets bad.
Cause when you walk in rooms, cause like I said, that company had bought companies, and
Mhm,
I'll never forget walking into a meeting and I tried to hide in the back of the room because
mhm.
that was a meeting when the government sent somebody, and our CEO had to fly in for that meeting.
Wow.
when the government get involved at that level.
Wow.
I was trying to hide in the corner behind child. I'm trying to this day to figure out why I got invited to that meeting.
Because
I
you're a
did
surprise
find,
person. They
you
know
know
you're
what,
going to find them out.
but I did find out how I got invited to that meeting.
Mhm.
And that was because after I barged into the room, the VP was like, he wanted me to have access to that type of information.
Okay. Okay.
So I ended up, he invited me to a lot of meetings. And when I showed up, my director was like, well, you don't have to stay. And he would come up and say, oh, come over. And he would force me to sit next to him. I was gritting my teeth a lot of times, but I have access to information and I have access to conversations that are like, that's what really goes on in these rooms. That's what really goes on in these conversations. Oh, these people really don't like each other, but he has the valuable information.
Mhm.
That's why he hired that person. Ah, okay, I get it. I get it. So, but yeah, the recruiting and the bidding is a valuable process. And if you don't get it right, you can bankrupt your company.
You can.
You
It'll
can
make
blackball your
just
company.
blackball. You can go to jail.
Yeah. Woo! We don't want
Yeah,
to talk about that. Go to
yeah,
jail. You can end up, there's just so many. You can actually get a bad name in the recruiting, and people don't even want to work for your company.
correct, correct. In certain aspects of the government, when the higher you go up the clearance food chain, I would like to say,
Yes.
if you go after Eagle contracts, if you go after, it's just certain contracts that's out there,
Hmm.
that once you become very niche,
Yes.
um, in certain clearance levels, um, there are only a certain amount of players,
Yes.
and you'll see the same players
Over and over again.
over and over and over. So you'll see a Lockheed Martin, a SAIC,
SEIS. Hmm.
you'll see a Northern Grumman, you'll see
The General Dynamics.
Accenture, Deloitte. You'll see those realms of folks. You'll see, in
But that's
cybersecurity,
because
like say,
they learn how to play the game.
yeah, they learn how to play the game, and then you'll see like people that graduated. There's a program in the federal government called the Mentor Protege Program.
Hmm.
um, you'll see those folks that have graduated from the Mentor Protege program. They were once AA certified
Hmm.
companies. And then once they graduate from the AA program, they start going after the larger contracts, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 million dollars, $100 million contracts. And they'll start bidding right beside the Deloittes, the Lockheed,
Yes.
the Raytheon, and those big names that have been out there for years,
Years.
years, years.
Yes.
I mean, SAIC and it used to be SAIC used to be CSC, I think.
Yes,
Um,
CSC became SAIC, and but then they got bought by somebody else, and they
But
something
yeah,
else
so a
now.
lot of these companies used to be other companies, and they've merged with other companies, and they've been some major buyouts. But your Lockheeds, your Northern Grummans, your
Hmm.
those type of folks, the IBMs, the Accentures, the
Yes.
major, like, what people have to understand, that most major commercial companies like
Hmm.
AT&T,
Has a
Time
government sector.
have a government contracting section
Yes.
that they go after government contract work, like
Yes.
Comcast and Time
Spectrum.
Warner and just so many major brands, like Johnson and Johnson may go
People
after.
don't even realize Coca-Cola has a
Oh
government
yeah,
contracting
yeah.
sector.
They have government contracts because they want to supply Coca-Colas to a army base or
How do
um
you think, I'm gonna go here? Coca-Cola actually perfected a way to get their soda into MRE packs. How do they think they did that? Through a government contract.
right, right, right.
So, I don't want to take up
And
all of your
Johnson and
time.
Johnson may have done they create so many products, not just vaccines.
Oh my
but
God.
but Johnson and Johnson creates so many products, they may have worked their way into packages that are given to the Air Force, the Navy, the Army.
They're everywhere.
They may be everywhere. Like I said, um, what people don't realize is there's space for every entity in the
Yes.
federal space. They need the federal space needs morticians. They need
Yeah.
they may
Yes.
have professional services where they're looking for someone to come and train on soft skills. The federal space may have contracts wherein they need someone to come in and do career development because the people are going from being deployed in the field as soldiers to the working world.
I'm
Um,
glad you said that because I was just in a training yesterday where they were saying 94% of the workforce is going to need an upskills training by the year 2030.
yes,
How
yes,
you think they're going to do that? And that's just not the regular government. That's the government as well.
yeah. That's
And that is
everybody.
through consultancy.
Right,
The government is not going to hire a bunch of people to do that. They're going to contract that work out.
right, right, right. They're going to and the pandemic. Let's go there. the This pandemic.
Companies who were able to pivot were able to take advantage of that. But
Yes.
we're going to bring you back to discuss that on another
Another show.
conversation. So I want to thank you
Thank
for,
you. Thank you.
taking time out today. And you're going to come back and we're going to discuss the pivoting during the pandemic.
Yeah, that would be a
That
great
was
subject.
so there were so many people that were able to pivot during that time.
And
And
recruitment
we've
got
had
really,
offline conversations about that. So,
yes. And
so
recruitment got very strange during the pandemic.
all right. So thank you again. And do you do private consultancy work?
Yes, I do a private consultant's work. I am listed as a government contractor under L. Jones and Associates. So I am a small business, a small woman-owned business, certified under a blanket contract under GSA. You can use my service within the federal space if you have anyone out there looking to partner with someone that is a woman owned business. As well as I do commercial, career development, workforce development, HR, professional skills training through private companies, individuals, commercial companies, government entities. And I can be reached at 443-500-6381.
And
So,
for
yes. Mhm.
I'm sorry. And
I
I
know,
just
I was
want
just saying, and it's L. Jones and Associates.
Okay, and I just want to thank you for giving us time today. And that'll be all for this installment of Contractors Conversation. I'm Luciana Turner of the LT&A Consulting Group. And just remember, a stressed mind cannot create. Take time out to decompress. You
Yes.
know, breathe, read a book, take in what you got today. Another episode we talked about mental health care. Another episode I'm posting, we talked about getting into groups, um, keeping that circle tight but informative. This goes along with that, making sure you're in contact with groups of individuals that can point you in the direction of consultants that can help you with the recruiting and bidding and making sure those proposals are right. But you can't do all of that if you're in a hyper stressed state of mind.
Right.
Um, so tell everybody about this installment of the Contractors Conversation, and we'll be back. Have an amazing day.
All right. Goodbye.